Welcome back to Good Day on the Road. We are visiting neighborhoods all over Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. A very special one is the Old West End, where the Glass City became the Glass City.
Yes, and then the love for glass here at the Toledo Museum of Art is, well, clearly obvious.
Yes.
And across the street from where we are, we have the TMA's Glass Pavilion, and this is where artists are busy demonstrating glass blowing, and I got to feel the heat during one of their demonstrations in their workshops. Check it out. Since we were on the road, we wanted to head, of course, and see inside the Glass Pavilion a little hidden treasure, which is the glass blowing studio here. And I have Misha, who's going to kind of walk us through a demonstration on one of the items that the studio is making here this month. And what is that item?
Yeah, so our glass art workshop item for the month of May are flowers. So public workshop, so public can sign up on the museum's website, come in and work with the studio artists, much like myself. So we can get started.
Yeah, let's get started.
So we're going to start out with a stainless steel metal rod that is preheated roughly up to maybe 900 degrees or so on the very tip, so we can actually gather glass. Molten glass has about the same viscosity as room temperature honey.
Oh, okay.
So our furnace is held at 2,150 degrees Fahrenheit.
Quite warm.
Yeah, quite warm. 25 degrees hotter than lava. But we're able to gather glass by rotating the pipe inside the pot of molten glass. And as we come out, as long as you can keep turning, the glass will always stay on center. But if you stop turning, gravity does try to take over. So the main key for most glass blowers is always keep turning. But then we're able to add color by tap lifting and turning within these little tins that contain basically densely colored glass. And from here, we need to melt this all in. So coming over to the reheating chamber, which is also at that 2,150 degrees, just a giant drum of fire, essentially. Okay. We're going to be able to heat up those little chunks, and you can see how they went from those really sharp, jagged pieces, and they're kind of rounding out, and eventually they melt into the surface and just become homogeneous with the glass below.
Okay, so we won't have that ripple effect that we have on the glass.
Exactly. So the only reason it looks visually yellow or orange is actually the radiating heat light. So it's actually visual heat light that you're seeing coming off of that glass.
I love this science, from the light to the gravity. This is what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's all, you know, one piece now, and it's just molded. You can only see kind of those tight speckles.
Yeah, and so we're just going to shape this up on this steel table. So this is just slowly cooling down the glass, and the color is never going to look exactly how it will look once it cools down to room temperature. In order to get color in glass, you actually contaminate clear glass with different metal or metal oxides to create color. So in order to get a green, you add metal like iron.
Okay, and then you have those chemical reactions.
Yeah.
And voila, that's how we make that color.
So we'll let this cool down, and then we're going to get a gather over top of it. But for next, we're going to kind of think about the color that we want our actual flower to be. Okay. We're going to do this in layers. So I have a little bit of this yellow. Looks kind of real pale right now. But again, the colors are going to be reacting to the heat and the metal inside. So this is actually a brilliant gold.
Okay. And how do you know when you're dipping into the furnace there, how do you know how much glass you need for an object?
So roughly every time you gather, you can kind of anticipate that you're going to be almost doubling the size of the material that you have on the end of your pipe. But it's a lot of experience.
You learn as you go through time. Because you've been doing this for over a decade, you said.
I've been blowing glass for 11 years. I started back in college. And the first time I ever gathered glass on a metal rod, you know, I gathered almost all the way up the pipe, and it's not ideal. So now that we have the color on the surface, it's kind of like a flat disc. So from here, we're going to start doing all of the, in a sense, sculpting to turn it into a flower. You have maybe about 30 to 45 seconds or so of a really good working time while the glass is hot. And then before you have to reheat to keep working. You kind of use heat, gravity, and a little bit of cooling to your advantage. So I just kind of cool down the face of the flower really quick. And then the first thing to do a pulled flower to create your texture is kind of pulling backwards towards you. Okay. Kind of creating these little petal looks all the way around. So I'm just using oversized tweezers, kind of pinch and pull backwards. Glass has a lot of the same movement as like taffy and honey. Honey while it's molten, taffy while you're kind of working
with it. Yeah, because it almost looked a little bit sticky at times.
Yes. So we kind of get the little petals for the flower.
Yep, it's looking good so far. We're getting that good shape.
And then to create a little bit of dimension, I'll still use the tweezers, but I'm going to grab a little bit deeper. Instead of pulling backwards, I'm actually going to pull over towards that wall and kind of start stretching it. We're going to kind of sculpt and then get the length of the flower that we want.
Okay, kind of take it to create kind of that bell look and really give it a little more dimension as we go. So really you add, you know, through the whole process, you add the color and then you really just kind of manipulate the glass.
Yeah, a lot of glass sculpture is a lot of manipulation. And glass blowing too, but the sculpting portion is kind of where you start seeing things really become kind of alive through the piece, because you start with this blob and then you're making it into something else.
Yeah, I was going to say it's looking great already with what we have, and you can really see that structure already.
Which, in the point of doing a workshop with someone, this is where we ask, do you want a straight stem or a curly stem?
I want the most beautiful stem.
Curly? We'll go curly. So we're going to get this nice and hot. The glass is kind of moving. I'm actually watching how the glass is moving, remembering that that top portion is actually a little bit colder. Again, cooling down the little face of the flower right there. And then, instead of pulling outwards, we're going to use gravity to our advantage.
And
start
just
stretching.
Pull it down.
So then it's going to start pooling on its own.
Okay.
And then in order to give it a little curl while the glass is cooling, we can actually curl.
Ooh, look at that. It looks like a flower and the most beautiful stem. So, here's the completed project with the most beautiful stem. Voila!
It's beautiful.
Isn't it? So the colors have now cooled, so you can really kind of see that it's more of that yellow, kind of, you know, maybe even a sunflower look, and then you have that bright green stem that goes, and just, you know, Misha did a fantastic job, just gorgeous. Hot in there, though. I wasn't,
a little warm.
you know, really expecting that, though I should have known.
And they do these demonstrations regularly, so you make sure you get out there. I took my mom one year, and it was a lot of fun, so make sure you get out there, check the calendar, and see how they do this, because it is very cool to see it in person.
Yes, in June, they're doing strawberries to give everybody the heads up.
Very cool. All right.